Hey guys, how you doing today? Today in the shop, we're gonna wind up taking some pistons out of a small block Chevy. I gotta take this motor apart, clean it up. I think I found a buyer for it. All right, so tools we're gonna need today. We're gonna need a 1/2-inch drive socket. It's gotta be a 7/16. I don't know if we can see that. 7/16, but here's the weird thing. It's got to be a 12 point, not a 6 point, 12 point socket. I'm going to be using an extension with some tape on it to knock the piston out. I'm going to be using a 1/2-inch dry breaker bar, 2 pieces of fuel line to protect the bolts when they're coming out, and a hammer. All right, let's get to it. And get you guys set up here so you can see what's going on. Let's see how that view is. It's not too bad. All right, so first thing I got to do, you see these bolts, they're not 6-point bolts, they're 12-point bolts, is I'm going to break them loose. Now, when I put these back together, I'm going to have to remember that that they're 45 foot-pounds. But I'm going to relook them up also. Now, I should have showed you this early, but I'll show it when I get it out, that there is a number 1 stamped on it. And there are also numbers on the side. And I believe those numbers that are on the side are saying what type of material the rod is made from. Now, these aren't your stock rods like we've been using. These are aftermarket forged rods. These are high performance, I believe, Eagle rods. So I got these nuts loose a little bit. I'm going to tap them gently. Start separating the rod cap. All right, let me remove these 2 nuts. Now sometimes if that doesn't want to separate, and one thing I don't want to do is dislodge the studs. All right, that one's a little stiff. I'm going to have to put the nut back on it. All right, there she goes. Now, I want to put the nut on there so I don't want to tap directly on the threads and destroy the threads of the bolts. But I got my upper rod cap off. The rod bearing stayed in here. I'll get that out in a minute. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to put my hoses onto my rods, studs, so they don't get nicked. And the main thing I don't want to do is nick the crank journal. You nick the crank journal, you got some big problems. You're going to have to go to a machine shop. I'll put my extension down here. I'm going to start walking this piston out the bottom. I'm going to hit it right where the wrist pin is. The other thing I want to be ready to do is catch it. Don't want it falling on the ground. If it falls on the ground, it can... aluminum is very soft. One of the characteristics of it's very soft, that if it hits, the gap for the ring can become closed and trap the ring, that the ring's not sitting in there properly and you can lose compression. All right, she's about ready to come out. All right, my other half fell off. Make it a mess. All right, so I got my piston out. Now, what I always do also is I look on the back of my bearing. I always want to see if the crank has been serviced. Now, I don't have my glasses on it, but I think it says STD. And STD stands for standard, so it has not been cut. So This crank, well, I should have known that. This crank is brand new. It's a brand new Eagle crank. This motor's never been run before. And that's how you safely remove a piston. But what I also like to do, I'm not finished yet, is I have a little notch right there. I like to put, my bearing has a little notch on it. I like to put them back in. And then I find my rod cap. And I'm going to do the same to my rod cap. The one thing we don't want to do is mix up these rod caps. This rod cap will not work on another connecting rod. When these are machined, they're machined with this cap on it to create a certain distance. And I believe a small block Chevy journal distance is 2.10. Also, when I put it on, I try to find my notch right there. And when I put them together, they go notch side to notch side. So when you look in there, you should see a notch there and a notch there. It goes put together. I take my bolts, spin them back on so we don't lose them. And I just drop this down in the oil filter. I'm gonna have to dig that out with a magnet. All right, guys, until next time, stay safe.